Good morning. Today is the 20th day of Sivan, the 9th of June. And we are up to the, theoretically, 6th and 7th readings of Parashat BeHa'alotcha. Let's start with the 6th reading because we have something we owe from a long time ago, from about a week ago or 2 weeks ago when we spoke about it. The number of Levites, if you remember, in the census of the Levites in Parashat Naso, was 22,000, and there were 22,273 firstborn. And so they ended up exchanging one for the other because the firstborn had lost their right to be the ones serving in the tabernacle, and the Levites took their place. And we mentioned that this number 22,000 is very important in Torah. So where we meet it finally now, we mentioned it back then, is here in our 6th reading, the first 2 verses, which are verses that are very famous because we say them every time we open the Ark in Shul, in the synagogue. And they read something like this. Moses would say, "Arise, O God, may your enemies be scattered, and may those who hate you flee from you." And when the Ark came to rest, when we put the Torah back into the Ark, Moses would say, "Repose, O God, among the myriads and thousands of Israel." So that's a translation I have in front of me, but really it translates into the 10,000s, meaning there's no special word in English for 10,000. There is one in Hebrew and there is one in Chinese, I understand, but there's none in the European languages. So you're not familiar with there being a word for 10,000, but in Hebrew it's a revava, which means 10,000 people. So here it's rivavot alfei Israel, 2 10,000s, 20,000, plus 2,000s. So we have 22,000s. In all the mystical literature of Judaism, there's a big deal about this number 22,000, saying that the Torah could only be given when there were 22,000 people of pure heart. And in that case, those were the Levites who didn't sin with the golden calf. And so he mentions it also here that when the ark comes to rest, it comes to rest among the 22,000 of Israel. Meaning there always have to be, this is a thing that was passed down through generations, there always have to be 22,000 who are dedicated to the study of Torah. So maybe some other time we'll go more in depth into these numbers and what exactly they signify. But I want to move on because there's a bit more to get through. After that, we have the whole story of God having to take Moses' special spirit and place it upon 70 of the elders so that they could prophesy as well. And they had a limited prophecy. And then there were 2 prophets whose names were Eldad and Medad who continued to prophesy. I also wanted to spend a lot of time on them. There's so much to say about them, but we'll have to defer this time and maybe some other time. What we want to get to now is the 7th reading. And the 7th reading, if you remember, when they first came out of Egypt, they complained that there was no food to eat. So there we have the very, very special story of how the manna started coming down. So basically God told Moses, you can tell them that from now on every morning they will have manna coming down. Moses did something amazing. God did not tell him, but he told the people, and in the evening you will eat meat. And he didn't tell them how the meat would come. So that is considered to be the source of a very, very important topic called confidence in God that we spent, if you're on my Patreon, then you know there's a 73-part series on what it means to have confidence in God, faith and confidence. And there Moses exercised his confidence and he, in a sense, dictated what God eventually performed. And that's known by the sages as tzaddik gozer v'kadosh baruch hu mekayem, that the tzaddik, the pious individual, is able to make a decree and God follows it. So Moses made this decree that there would be meat, and God didn't say anything. And then in the evening there indeed came the quail, and they would eat from it. The quail didn't come every evening. It came once in a while in the evenings. So here apparently, after a year and almost 2 years in the wilderness, there was a long time between the visits of the quail, and there was no more meat left. And so they asked him again. At this time they were very angry and obnoxious and so on, and they didn't believe in God anymore, even though they were having this miracle of quail coming every once in a while. And then Moses cried out to God again, and the quail came. This time, the quail was in such crazy numbers that it's almost impossible to understand. It was almost like a locust of quail. And there were those, it says here that they were the mixed multitudes, but there were those who were so hungry for flesh that they basically ate them alive. And God struck them down, and they were buried there. And the name of the place is known as Kivrot HaTa'ava, the burial of the craving. That's the literal translation. Now, since the people that were buried there were those who craved, the name should have been the burial place of those who craved, not the burial of the craving. It's not the craving that was buried. What was buried were the people who craved, who could not control themselves. So the Baal Shem Tov has a very important teaching on this, that he says that there are times in your life when you have a tremendous, what is known as I don't remember what the English word is, in Latin it's called a bolmus. And a bolmus means that a person has an insatiable craving for something. They simply cannot go on with their lives without it. It says the Baal Shem Tov, if you're able to control your craving at those moments, then you will bury the craving itself. Meaning you will overcome the needs, the physical cravings of the body, and be free to control your life however you want. And there are not many moments like this in a person's life, but if you recognize them and you're able to pass that test, then that place becomes the burial of the craving, which is what it was meant to be. So the Baal Shem Tov says that all the names of all the places in which they camped in the wilderness, and this is one of the locations, are actually positive names. They originally have, everything in our lives has a potential of becoming something positive. But sometimes we don't do it right, and then what was initially meant to be a potentially positive event turns into something negative. So here, the name retained the positive aspect, which was that it could have become the burial place of the craving itself. Instead, because they weren't able to contain themselves, it became the burial place of the cravers. But the name is retained, the burial of the craving. Let's go to the very, very last story in our Parsha. The very last story is amazing. It's about Aaron and Miriam talking about Moses and the fact that Moses had left his wife. He had divorced her. And the reason he had divorced her was because he was a prophet. And Miriam and Aaron didn't see this in a positive light. The reason being that they reasoned like this. They said, we too are prophets and we have prophecy from time to time. If it was true that a prophet could not be married, then we too should have been told by the divine presence to divorce our spouses. And that didn't happen. So they're wondering, they're not speaking really ill, as it says, they're only speaking about Moses, and they're wondering what is going on here. Why did he have to divorce? By the way, incidentally, this is very important to know, that the Zohar writes that the Messiah will not be like Moses. That Moses, even though he had prophecy, because he had prophecy at every moment, he could be receiving a prophecy, he had to be divorced. He couldn't be with his wife, because he couldn't be defiled in any way from sexual relations. He didn't know when it would happen next, so he couldn't even wait the time from getting out of bed and going to the mikveh to purify himself. He couldn't even wait that much because the prophecy could come at any moment. But the Zohar says that the Messiah will not be like that, and that he will necessarily remain married to his wife and always be with his wife wherever he goes, as the complete rectification of prophecy is that it's able to come down specifically to a married couple and not just to one individual. So that's a very important thing to know, and I'm saying that just as an aside. But I want to focus on something at the very end. Miriam was punished with leprosy, and she became all white from this illness. And Aaron said to Moses, we're looking at the 7th reading, this is Numbers 12, verse 11 and 12. Aaron said to Moses, "Please, my master, do not hold us accountable for our sin, for we acted foolishly and sinned. Let her," meaning Miriam, "not remain like a dead person, for since she also came out of our mother's womb, she is our own flesh, and half our flesh is consumed." I'm reading it with a little bit of the commentary into it. Really, it says, literally, "May she not be like a dead person, who when he comes out of his mother's womb, half his flesh is consumed." But he's talking about Miriam. And what he's saying to Moses is, pray for her so that she's healed. And what's his argument? His argument is that because she's our sister, the fact that she is afflicted now with leprosy and her body is consumed with it, she's ill, that means that half of our bodies are consumed also. It means that we're half dead as well. Now this is an incredible, first of all, incredible lesson about the relationship between siblings. What is Aaron saying? And we have to look at these words carefully. He's saying that half of our flesh is consumed because she's consumed. How does that work? There are 3 children. Yocheved had 3 children. Miriam was the eldest, Aaron, and Moses. So if Miriam's flesh is entirely consumed, how much of Aaron and Moses' flesh body is consumed? 1/3. So why did he say 1/2? How does he? Obviously he knows math. So what's this? How does he reckon this? So there's a number of possible answers. The first answer, which I think is the most important, is to know that the relationship between every 2 siblings is that they are a whole. It doesn't matter if you have 12 children or 15 children. The relationship between every 2 children should be, this is a lesson for the children, not for the parents. Parents can't teach them this. But this is what Aaron is saying to Moses. Because she is our sister, then half of my flesh is consumed and half of your flesh is consumed. Because we each have a separate relationship. But even just to understand that we have a separate relationship, and if one is hurting, then the other is also hurting, and each one separately, that in and of itself is a tremendous basis for understanding the type of relationship we want to foster between siblings. But there's another beautiful thing here, and this comes out in the Zohar many times. Moshe and Aaron are known to be the Sfirot of Netzach and Hod, or victory and acknowledgement. And many times in the Zohar they appear as 2 halves of a single body. That's what they're called. Trein palgei gufa. The 2 halves of a single body. Sometimes we even say they're like the 2 sides of a coin. So what does this mean? It means that we normally think that it's Moses and Aaron that are the 2 halves, the victory and the acknowledgement. Moses being victory and Aaron being acknowledgement. In Chassidus we say that these are what we call active confidence and passive confidence. The ability to have active confidence to do things in order to pursue one's goal, and passive confidence is when I cannot do anything, to have confidence in God that He will perform what I need performed because I can't do it myself. But they're always characterized as male and female. And so really what we're getting here is that it's not just that Moses and Miriam and Aaron and Miriam have this relationship that together they are a whole, but rather this is the essence of the relationship between the victory, the sphere of victory and the sphere of acknowledgement, between Netzach and Hod, that they're masculine and feminine. So it's either Moses is the victory and Miriam is the acknowledgement. she's the feminine, or in Aaron's case, it becomes relative, and Aaron becomes the victory, and Miriam becomes the acknowledgement. What do we gain from this? We gain from this one of the most beautiful statements in the entire Tanakh, in the entire Bible, that I believe it's the prophet Amos who says that when I took you out of Egypt, I sent my 3 messengers. And who are the 3 messengers? They were Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, he writes there. That is the threesome that brought the Jewish people out of Egypt. We were usually only accustomed to thinking about Moses and Aaron, but the truth is that without Miriam, none of this could have worked. And we know that each one of them contributed a certain miracle. Miriam contributed Miriam's well, and there's much more to talk about this. Let's just mention, I hope I remember this gematria correctly, that Moses, Aaron, and Miriam in gematria equals the exodus from Egypt, Yetziat Mitzrayim. So I'm wishing everyone a good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom, and I hope to see you on Sunday. It's 2 hours later on Sundays. All the best.
Okay. Shabbat Shalom.